And hello, everybody. And this is Adrienne Berg, and this is The Ageless Traveler. And as you know, every time we have a very special guest on our podcast, The Ageless Traveler, we also say hello to them face to face, and we go into detail on some other things that we think would be very useful for you. And today we are continuing with our conversation with Judith Frizlen. And of course, on our audio show, on our podcast, we talked about grandparenting and how we can prepare from the very beginning, from when kids are young, because Judith is an early childhood specialist, an expert. She's the author of many books. We're going to talk about a new book of hers, one we did not mention on the show. But we were talking about her new book that has to do with wisdom and wonder and the grandparenting relationship. But here we're going to talk about something else. And that is how to write a memoir, and specifically a travel memoir, because she has done that as well. Let me give you Unpacking Guilt, A Mother's Journey to Freedom. And this is going to show you that a travel memoir does not have to be a travel guide. It doesn't have to be a fact-based rendition of a photos. It can be something very creative and something very different. So thank you for being back with us today, Judith. And I love the couch. I love the Marimekko fabrics. That's great.
The couch is blue. It's a teal blue.
It's so lovely. But I have to ask you this. We're talking about process. Now, this particular book, which came out in 2018, I believe, and is available on Amazon, that is a memoir. It's a travel memoir, but it's also almost like an expiation of a place that you were at. So tell us the process. What brought you to write this in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I was at the point, I was about 50 years old, and I was looking back. My children were getting to the point of the end of that active parenting phase. And I was, as an early childhood educator, I knew more about working with young children then than I knew when my children were young. So I look back with some regrets. I wish I would have, if I had only known, and that kind of thing. So I was reconciling my experience as a mother, and an opportunity to travel with 3 women friends came up, and I decided I would make that trip to Scotland with them, and I would turn the trip into kind of a pilgrimage, and I would leave that day-to-day life where I had repetitive thoughts about these regrets, and I would go and I would see what I could find that would give me kind of more joy. And I called it the Love, Light, and Laughter Tour. And that was before that expression became so common. Right. But it was really, that's what I want to restore in my life, just lighten up, not to be so serious, not to be caught up with regrets. And so no better place than to be with women friends to laugh a lot, right? And it was kind of the filter that I saw what was happening through. The sensory information is always what's interesting on a trip, but I wanted to have it all have an impact on this soul experience I wanted to have.
And so I wrote what inspired you to take this trip and put it pen to paper?
Well, it was the pain I was in. It was the soul pain I was experiencing. And I wanted to, I knew I couldn't just say, I want to get rid of that. I knew I needed to put something else there in place of it. So I wanted to cultivate some new habits of seeing the world in a more positive way and experiencing more joy. And so when I went to places like in Scotland, where they have this burial mound where the light on the solstice shines all the way through, I was touched. I thought, wow, people have done amazing things. And it put my experience in perspective. And every day I wrote about what was happening. And when I came home, I continued to work with it. So I didn't come home and just say, oh, that was fun, I'm done. I continued to work with it and see what it was those experiences brought me on a soul level.
One thing you just learned was write simultaneously, contemporaneously with your experience. So you didn't wait till you got home. You did it that day. Okay. Second of all, you bring it home, and even if you're busy, you put it on the shelf, you take it back. Now, after you've decided to focus on the book, you had your material. Did you get yourself an editor? Did you edit it yourself? What's the process you had to bring it from that baby stage to the mature stage of actually being on Amazon?
Yeah, I got a developmental editor first, just to see about the structure of the book. And the first thing she told me is throw away the first 18 pages.
Always hard.
Tell
Always
more,
hard.
right? This stuff. And tell more about your personal experience growing up, your childhood, and that kind of thing. So I was like, okay. So she just made it a better book. So yeah, so I definitely worked with an editor, and I had a book designer, and yeah. And I
How do you
allowed,
find these folks? There are many ways to find them. How do you find?
well, back then, my first two books were published through an organization, and I asked them who they used, and I had recommendations. Do not go out on the internet and just look and go with people who come up, because the first people to come up might not be the best people. So talk to people who are experts. This last book, I had a book coach who I talked to. I'd ask questions and she'd give me detailed answers. I mean, talk to people who have already done it and know what's out there. Because there's a lot out there on the internet, and a lot of it really isn't helpful. Some of it is, but it's not all helpful.
So I absolutely agree. My first book, I had a publisher, and they really guided me. Then I had publishers after that, and a couple of self-published, but none of them was as could have been birthed, we'll say, without the guidance of some sort of an editor, reader, book developer, and so on. So we're speaking now with Judith Frizlen, and her own personal website is judithfrizlen.com, but please spell your name for everybody.
It's Frizlen.
So now to wrap up, once you have created this and you've gotten it out to the public, the next and last phase of writing a memoir is having people read it. What have you done? Of course, podcasts, be on the podcast. What else? So that's find your book.
This is the first time I've done it this way, but I hired a publicist in Buffalo, and they helped me find you. And they found you. I realized I needed some support. I like to work with a team. I don't like to work alone. And having a team really makes a difference for me. So, but I post on social media a lot. I'm doing a book signing in Buffalo in a couple of weeks, and then another one. I just keep practicing talking about it. And yeah, the more I talk about it, the more enthusiastic I get and excited. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I enjoy sharing it.
So what I want to say to you and to everybody who's listening, two things. One, write a travel memoir. Even if it stays in your drawer, let your family know about it. Because here we have a professional writer who has several books out already and has made it into a part of her life that's continuing. But you don't have to do that. You're going to have a beautiful, because I'm sure that just the writing of it, even the day-to-day, even those 18 pages you had to throw away, were important to your soul. So, and this is one way that a grandparent, an older adult, a mature person can really do a life review for their kids and their grandkids. So don't worry about the business side of it. But if you're interested in the business side of it, no, it's a business. You just heard how many people you worked with and hired and paid for, and then it brings it back. If you're not planning to do it that way, you'll probably have a lot of books in your garage. So yeah. So before we leave you, and I tell the folks a little something, what's the next book?
Oh, well, I've written a children's book called The Farm Store, and I'd like to have that published. I have an illustrator, but the thing I'm contemplating now is to make a foray into fiction. I read a book by Anne Monk Kidd, who also writes about traveling, and she described how she went from a memoir writer to being a fiction writer. And all of a sudden, reading that, I felt like I could do that. So I have an idea of historic fiction that I could write. That's the next.
Fantastic. I'm actually reading a historic fiction book now called Whalebone, which has become, one of these bestsellers and so on. But it's a first book, and it became that important as a first book. So you got to have the first book. Thank you so much. We'll be talking again, putting this on all of our social media. But I want you guys to know, and I want you to go on our social media Go to adrienneberg.com. You'll find out a lot about me if you have any interest in that, and in our Generation Bold podcast, which is award-winning. It's been around for about 7 years now. But my new baby, my new focus is to make sure that you can travel all your life. So the Ageless Traveler podcast, which is also on agelesstraveler.com, iTunes, Spotify, any place that you listen to podcasts, you can listen there and subscribe. You can also travel with us. We are not travel agents. We work with the best of the best for the particular trips that we think you will enjoy. Because our motto is lifelong travel made easy, so you never stop traveling. And until next